Blockbench is a free and open source low poly blocky style modeling tool. It is popularly used to make assets for Minecraft mods, whether that be new blocks, entities or animations, and it's usually used by small teams or solo devs. I've been using Blockbench for a couple months now in preparation for a future project where we're trying to achieve a more retro PlayStation 2 art style, and Blockbench was the obvious software choice. Modeling in Blockbench can be done ultra fast using its blocky modeling. It also has inbuilt texture painting, and if you have experience in Maya, you'll likely get the grasp of it very quickly. The main reason it's so fast is because it's intended for relatively simple low poly models, but more complex assets can still be achieved just by layering a lot of shapes. Blockbench doesn't have any sculpting, no advanced rigging, no physics, no node system, and limited shading options. You will be predominantly using cubes to make models, which can be restricting. Although it has these limitations, it wasn't designed to be able to create hyper-realistic models. It was made to achieve a specific stylized blocky look. I'll begin by taking you on a brief tour of the UI, then show a time lapse while describing my process for making models in Blockbench. Firstly, this plus icon is your best friend. This is how you add elements to your scene, from anything from a cube to splines to armatures. Other than the basic cube, there are some more advanced meshes available for you to pop in your scene, like cylinders, planes, spheres, etc., pretty much like Maya. For the sake of this basic demonstration, I'm just going to put in a cube. Now that we've got our cube in the scene, we're going to start at the top left, excluding the UV menu, which is this whole section. I'll talk about this briefly later. These first three icons are the Move, Resize, and Rotate tool, which will allow you to alter whatever you have selected in the scene by doing just that, moving it, resizing it, or rotating it. This is the Pivot tool, which allows you to change the pivot point on whatever geometry you have selected. This is the Vertex Snap tool, which is a useful tool to close gaps in your geometry by connecting the vertices. The Knife tool is used to create cuts in your geometry. This allows you to cut geometry into smaller pieces so you can alter it in more specific ways. This is the Transform Space tab. It allows you to change between local, global, and parent. This refers to the coordinate system and allows you to change how tools interact with your model's parts. For example, if you select local, the movement axis will follow the degree of rotation of the selected geometry. Mirror modeling is self-explanatory. It allows you to mirror your modeling. Since in Blockbench you'll be using a lot of separate geometry, it will automatically duplicate and mirror along whatever axis you have selected. Now, there are a lot more tools you can use by enabling in the Customize Toolbar section. I'm still relatively new to Blockbench, but these flip tools I found have been extremely useful. Now, going down to the outliner along the right side of the screen, we have the tab which will show any of your geometry, as well as the total number of geometries in the scene. This is where the Add Element icon is, which I already talked about briefly. This is the Group button to help you organize your geometry within the outliner. This button just toggles more options for your geometry for you to preface whether you want it to be automatically UV'd, included within an export, locked so it can't be edited, or whether it's visible or not. Finally, the search tool is just to search for specific parts of your geometry, which is why it is important to name your geometry as you go. Now that I've had a very quick and brief rundown of some of the basic tools in Blockbench, as part of this exercise I'm going to be running through my current process of modeling in Blockbench. I'm aiming for a low poly block-based model, and Blockbench is, again, the perfect tool for this. Stage 1, the block out. I'm going to be modeling this BMW E30. I've got a few reference images of the front, side, and a more dynamically angled shot of the car to get a better sense of its third-dimensional forms. We're going to begin with a rough block out to get the basic primary forms of the car. I'm just going to be eyeballing it, but you can add in image planes for any orthographic images you might have. Make sure, even while you're blocking out, you're being conscious of keeping your geometry aligned to the grid. This enables you to use the full potential of the auto symmetry toggle and the X, Y, and Z flipping tools. Depending on what you're creating, you can break symmetry when you're ready to add more detail. In the case of this car, we'll mainly be keeping it symmetrical. Stage 2, adding in details. Once the big shapes are correct, you should be able to tell what it is you're creating from the silhouette. Being able to do blockouts quickly, I feel, is a highly underestimated skill. Being able to have that foundation really helps when it's time to start adding in your details. As you can see in the time-lapse, I'm adding in the secondary forms by just making some small geometry adjustments and adding some more shapes to the car, like the front and rear bumpers, trims, mirrors, spoiler, and any interior details. Because we're using Blockbench, I still want the details to be a bit chunky. I want to avoid using 1 unit thick blocks if possible, so I can still add more detail when I'm texturing. A very useful technique I found when learning Blockbench was being able to inflate or deflate blocks by very, very small numbers like 0.0001 or minus 0.999. So A, the geometry isn't intersecting and it appears like all jittery, and B, so when you're texturing you can choose what piece is layered on the top, so you can paint the details on that piece. Some common mistakes to avoid is adding too much detail too early. This can make the whole asset feel a bit stiff. Over detailing it can lead to a muddy or unreadable model, especially if you're using a low resolution pixelated textures like I'll be. Finally, we go into some more tertiary details like the antenna, rear exhaust, and windows, which will look more like windows after they're textured. Stage 3, we're going to prep the model for textures. I quickly tested some texture sizes in preparation for texturing and noticed I had to change the sizes of some of the geometry to ensure they were in front of others using the deflate and inflate technique. This is just so the textures will show as intended when I'm painting them onto the model. For this model, seeing it's on the bigger side, I decided to go with 32-bit textures. The automatic UV made a map size of 512 by 512. I think I could have fit it on a 256 by 256, but for the sake of time I'll use the automatic UV. Stage 4, that's going to be painting on the textures. For Blockbench models, the main goal is to keep everything relatively clean and readable at a low resolution. Before anything else, I flooded the whole model with white, because I'll be using this white BMW as a color reference. I then used the outliner to hide everything while I focused on the windows. The process I used for the windows was a little strange. You first must erase everything, then using a low opacity brush, you can paint over fully transparency to give it a glassy look. There's probably a better way to achieve the same thing, but this is the way I discovered and used. I then start blocking in the dark parts of the car, the trim of the windows, the tires, the front grille, the door molding and handles. Looking back to speed up this process, I could have used symmetry, but sometimes I find it a little tranquil to just paint my models manually. I blacked out the bottom of the car, but painted a white border around the bottom to add that little lip that the cars have. I then tested some greys to use as the shaping color for the doors, just mainly to give it more shape. I initially chose a light grey, then I go back and forth between a dark and a light until I then eventually settled on the light. I moved to the front of the car and filled the bumper with black, and then quickly had to resize the number plate. I wanted it to appear a little bit 3D, so I had to extrude it a little bit from the bumper, and then use the inflation method again to make sure the textures were appearing the way I wanted them to. I then added in the textures for the front grille and headlights. I reused the same lighter grey I used for the doors to add some shadows and some indented metal at the front and around the car. I then went to go work on making a texture for the wheel hubcap and immediately fell on a design I was happy with. I experimented with some darker lines for the shape of the door and added this indented line which runs across the side of the car. I darkened the wheel arches just so they would stand out a little bit more. I added some details on the hood, added the BMW logo, and added the orange indicator lights as well as another set of lights on the lower part of the front of the car. Then moved to the back side of the car and followed a similar method. I coloured in the back bumper, then I had to resize the back number plate. I added in the rear orange indicator lights and an outline of a boot. Blacked out the inner side of the wheels you can't see, as well as blacked out some of the inner fender, and went ahead and finished up texturing the tires. Just finishing up texturing now, I tweaked around with some of the geometry around the bumper and then added a darker grey to better emphasize the wheel arches. Finally, I added black to the trim of the wheels and darkened the interior, chairs and steering wheel. Then did some final tweaks and realized I wasn't recording. I added some wear to the tires, added a sun strip and some more framing onto the windows. And here are some beauty shots of the BMW after it's all finished up. I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. I think the whole model and textures took about 2.5 hours. There are a lot of Blockbench tutorials out there on YouTube. All the videos you see on screen now, I've watched and learnt a lot. In particular, when I was getting started, this Blockbench for Beginners video by Arts by Kev really kickstarted my learning. This Ocean Cargo Fish video by Wacky Blocks is also really cool. Would highly recommend you check it out if you're looking for something a little more advanced. If you are interested in doing any of these further learning videos, flick me a DM and I'll be happy to send you the links. And that wraps up the modeling and texturing demonstration. Hopefully this video helps you better understand how Blockbench could potentially fit into a pipeline, or just the general purpose of Blockbench. If you want some of my project files or more examples, send me a DM and I'll send them through. But thanks for sticking through my video.